Welcome back to Bible Shorts, episode 101. The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. In our episode last week, we were studying Luke chapter 5, in which Jesus calls some people to come follow him as he travels around Galilee teaching and healing. We also learned about some friends of a paralyzed man who break open the roof of a house where Jesus is teaching, and then they let down their friend through the hole so Jesus can heal their friend. Jesus horrified some of the teachers of the Jewish religious law who were present when he told the man that his sins were forgiven. And then the teachers of the law freaked out, saying to themselves, "Who does this guy think he is? No one can forgive sins but God alone." And Jesus then tells them, the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins, and then he heals the man. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and his disciples began to pick some heads of grain, rub them in their hands, and eat the kernels. Some of the Pharisees asked, "Why are you doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" Remember, back then Jews were not supposed to do any work on the Sabbath. And even picking these grains of wheat was considered work. Jesus answered them, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God and took and ate the consecrated showbread, bread only the priests were supposed to eat. Then Jesus said to them, 'The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath.'" Wow, that's quite a statement, to say that he is greater than the rules the religious leaders have come up with to decide what people can or can't do, to follow God's gift of a day called the Sabbath, when people were to rest. Why does he keep saying the Son of Man? Why doesn't he just say out loud, "I am the Messiah you are all waiting for"? Remember that the Jewish people were expecting a man, a descendant of King David, to come and expel the Romans from their country and be their king. They referred to this person as the Messiah, which means the anointed one. A person is anointed with oil to mark him out for a special mission from God, like David was anointed by the prophet Samuel. I wonder if Jesus calls himself the Son of Man instead of saying he was the Messiah, which he actually is, because he doesn't want the people to start a war with the Romans. He's come to call people to focus on loving God and loving other people. Luke then tells us, on another Sabbath, he went into a synagogue and was teaching, and a man was there whose right hand was all shriveled up. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched closely to see, would he heal on the Sabbath? Another thing they considered work. Jesus knew what they were thinking and said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Get up and stand in front of everyone." So the man got up and stood there. Then Jesus said to them, "I asked you, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or destroy it?" Jesus looked around at them all and then said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He did so, and his hand was completely restored. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law were furious and began to discuss with one another what they might do to Jesus. Luke then tells us that Jesus went out to a mountainside to pray and spent the night praying to God. When morning came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them to be his special followers. the 12 apostles, the ones whom he would spend all the next year with, teaching them, explaining things to them. These 12 apostles were people he was depending upon to carry on his mission, the good news from God, after he would be crucified, raised from the dead, and return to his Father in heaven. Jesus came down with them and stood with a great crowd of his disciples and a great multitude of people from all Judea, Jerusalem, and the coast of Tyre and Sidon. They'd come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases, and those who were troubled with unclean spirits were cured. And everyone in the crowd was trying to touch him, for power came out from him and healed all of them. Luke then summarizes some of the major ideas that Jesus taught to the crowds, a shorter version of what in the book of Matthew is called the Sermon on the Mount, the sermon that we could spend an entire year studying. But if we try to come up with a few sentences to say, what was he talking about? It was basically do to others as you would have them do to you. Forgive others, and you will be forgiven. Love God. Now, Jesus likes to use stories, what we call parables, to show what he's trying to say. So now he says, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I tell you? I will show you what someone is like who comes to me, hears my words, and acts on them." Once there were 2 men. Each was building a house. One man built a house by digging deeply and laying the foundation of the house on rock. The other built a house on the sand without a foundation. When a storm came, the flood waters rose, the wind blew, and the river burst against the 2 houses. The one who hears my words and does not act on them is like the person who built a house on sand, the ground without a foundation. When the river burst against it, it quickly collapsed, and great was the ruin of that house. But the one who comes to me, hears my words, and acts on them is like the person who built a house on rock. The storm, the wind, the flood could not shake it because it had been well built. I think Jesus is trying to say that all of us go through tough times. Sometimes even really bad things happen. But having a relationship with God, trusting in God, can help us get through them. King David trusted in God like that. He called the Lord the rock of his salvation. So, how do we hear God's words and learn to trust him? Well, we've got the gift of the Bible, the Old and New Testament. We have our community of the church and our friends. And we have the special gift of being able to pray and tell Jesus everything we are feeling. So what happens next? Look for Bible Shorts episode 102, Luke chapter 7, the faith of a centurion.